Bob was first a director in Safaricom, a board member, that is, in Safaricom. And then when they were looking to replace Michael, the guy said, okay, it looks like Bob can make it. And they convinced him, he agreed. But Bob had one condition, that he needed to spend 6 months understanding the organization before he became CEO. I don't know if any of you have ever read the book or watched the TV series, Undercover Boss. So Bob ended up doing something like that. So fast forward, when he became CEO about 2 months later, said, I tell the guys, this guy who has been announced, isn't this the guy we had lunch with $2 is working as CEO's office? And we started preparing ourselves now to be exited from the organization for some of those things that we had been saying, If you look at yourself and assume that your career path is a straight line, you will be very frustrated. You're ambitious, you are knowledgeable, you have the passion, but you must accept that your career, for you to grow to where you want to be, maybe a CEO of a company or whatever it is, you will have a zigzag, a kind of winding path. And there are basic principles regardless of whatever you want to do, whether you are in business or employment. The first is, I found this from one of my bosses who told me, if you want to know whether you are doing the right thing, you ask yourself just 2 questions. Life in whatever you do is very simple. You have some inputs that you receive.
Yeah.
There is some value addition that you do to it. There is some output that you give. What are the things that you are then investing your money in? The most important is...
I will request our guest tonight, Peter Gichangi, to introduce himself, and then we carry on. Peter, please.
Asante, Steve, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of us tonight. It's good to be amongst friends, amongst colleagues, amongst people that spent a good part of a formative life with, and to be here to just discuss, what has changed or what has happened in that period of time. I tried to do chemical engineering. I said tried because I never ended up finishing it. The guys who are with at Mang'u know why. And I know Steve, has been asking what happened to the political fire after campus. No, after high school, it never died.
Yes.
Yeah, it never died.
So don't move too quickly there.
Yeah, it was after high school, it never died.
There.
Yeah, we had quite a bit of fracas in campus, both in Moi and JKUAT, but I think in Moi it got very, negative. I think at the end of my first year, I became assistant secretary, and we ended up doing quite a lot of things at the end of my first year in campus and my second year. Which led to 3,000 academic days suspension, which they count when your cohort or the guys you joined with are actually in campus. So if they leave, they pause the counting the years, and then they will continue when your cohort resumes. And once your cohort is out, then they continue counting whenever campus is, in session. And
that's like 10 years.
Yeah, it's a massive period of time. So I ended up deciding to pursue another course, which I ended up doing IT in JKUAT. And true to myself at the time, I told the guys I had never been to campus. I was still thinking about picking a course because they were asking, why do you want to come and do a parallel course? Which, interestingly, in Moi, we were fighting with the university about parallel university, the parallel courses at the time, and telling them that this thing is not right. They're just guys who decided not to work hard enough like us in high school were the ones who are now having the easiest time in campus,
Yeah.
And, fast forward a few months later, I'm the one who is in this parallel program. So it was quite an intriguing thing. My mom has never forgotten. So she always reminds me. Every time I do something cheeky, she always tells me, you remember you are the one who was fighting this parallel thing, and it's the one that has gotten you where you are today.
Yeah, that was idea.
You know? Yeah, so I ended up, I don't know whether it's a white lie or an actual lie. So I told them, no, I was thinking about which course to pursue. I like IT. So I've decided to come and do IT. And they quickly admitted me into IT in JKUAT. I applied for that course when it was like 2 days to the deadline.
Uh-huh.
And so they took a very short time to review my documents and approve. They didn't do any background checks, etc. But that was quite short-lived because my behaviors had not changed much. So a few months later, I was at it with the vice chancellor of JKUAT, who was Wanjohi at the time. You guys remember him, very close to the Kibaki government.
Yeah.
But he was a different vice chancellor, not like the Moi vice chancellor that we had then, Dr. Some, and the deputy VC, Dr. Kamal, or Professor Kamal, Biwot's wife. This guy decided to, instead of outrightly punishing, just writing to my parents. And the trauma that my parents had gone through when we were in Moi, going through this student thing, they received a letter. My dad called me and told me, oh, come for your pocket money at home this week. I will not send. You just come and pick it. I was like, okay, let me go and see. Looks like an interest. Must be a huge amount that my dad wants to give me this time. And when I got home, we had dinner on this Friday. So I left campus on a Friday, got home. When I got there, we had dinner quietly, just the three of us. My siblings were away. So it was just my dad, my mom, and I, dinner. Then after the dinner, my dad handed me the letter from the university, from actually Professor Wanjohi, talking about the various political activities I was involved in campus, and that he had discovered that I had been sent away from Moi University because of the same. And if my parents were not going to do anything, then this would be the last university in Kenya I would ever attend. And that was the first jolting moment, I think, for me. From then, I just buckled down and went into studies, ended up graduating with a first class honors in IT.
Brilliant.
And yeah, have been in IT since 2007, so 16 years or thereabouts, doing this IT stuff. Various aspects. I think at the time I was very interested in software development, so I spent a lot of time in software development. I did a master's in IT a few years later in 2010, finished in 2012. Then I've had the opportunity to do various roles in Safaricom. I joined first as graduate engineer. I must thank a person who is not on this call, who is Haman Wandaba, one of my colleagues in, I think, campus, who had me the opportunity to join the graduate program in Safaricom in 2007. I ended up joining, and that formed quite a lot of my initial development in career, which exposed me to various aspects. We ended up, of course, in the graduate program, if anyone has gone through it, you end up going through the entire business. You learn what your primary craft is. And for me, that was the technology side. But you also learn all the other aspects, which is the business aspect. So ended up doing quite a lot across the rest of the business, understanding what a business is end to end, what makes it work, etc. And that was a good formation for me. Then I switched from various roles at that time. So software development, moved into technical product management for some business units, moved into innovation, moved into strategy. I left Safaricom for some period of time. Wasn't too long. I joined Chase Bank. I don't like to say it, but I was there when the bank went down. And we ended up in, that position where the bank had to go into some management of sorts. So, yeah, but then immediately after,
and that was their cue. That was their cue to go back to Safaricom.
Actually, Bob reached out to me coincidentally. So I was for a long time one of Bob's mentees. So when he came in, he picked a number of employees across the organization. One person in his exco, one person in exco -1, going all the way to the lowest level. And we were 10 of us in the organization. At the time, I was a very junior person when Bob came in. I think I was just a manager at the time. No, I was not even a manager. I was one level lower than a manager. But we ended up spending quite a lot of time with Bob, and I got quite a lot of mentorship from him. Sometimes you are asking what happened to the fire that was there in politics. It helps to still keep true to yourself. When Bob came in, Bob was first a director in Safaricom, a board member, that is, in Safaricom. And then when they were looking to replace Michael, the guy said, okay, it looks like Bob can make it. And they convinced him, he agreed. But Bob had one condition, that he needed to spend 6 months understanding the organization before he became CEO.
Okay.
I don't know if any of you have ever read the book or watched the TV series, Undercover Boss. So Bob ended up doing something like that. He actually, for the 6 months, he stopped being on the board, joined management, but he had no portfolio, or he didn't claim any portfolio. And whenever you would meet him, he would tell you, oh, I work for the CEO in the CEO's office. He would never say.
Wait, so guys, word did not go around that this guy is the CEO elect. Like he just
word did not go around until it was just like 2 weeks to the announcement. And he would just say, oh, he works in the CEO's office. So the way we met actually on a detailed basis is we were having lunch with some of our team members at the cafeteria in Safaricom. And then Bob came to have lunch. If you know me at the time, I was still one of the loudest people in any environment. So Bob decided to come and sit with us because we were quite animated in our discussions over lunch. So he took his lunch, came, can I join you guys? He said, oh yeah, please join us. And then, we continue with our talk. We ignore him completely. We have no clue who this guy is. And then at some point, after he's finished eating, he says, okay, can I take just a few notes of the things you are discussing? And he removes a notebook from his pocket, kind of takes some notes. Then after a while, I'm just curious. I say, so what exactly do you do? Why do you want to take this note? He says, oh, I work for the CEO's office. Yeah. I said, oh, I work for the CEO's office, or rather I work in the CEO's office. I want to pick some of these things that might be helpful for us. I will pass them on to the CEO. So, okay, if you really work for the CEO's office, then let's start over. Let's give you the truth about this organization and the things you need to fix. So, we go at it for quite a long while, and he's asking questions, he's taking notes. He was just very curious about multiple things. So fast forward when he became CEO about 2 months later, I tell the guys, this guy who has been announced, isn't this the guy we had lunch with who told us he's working in the CEO's office? And we started preparing ourselves now to be exited from the organization for some of those things that we had been saying, But coincidentally, Bob searched for us and said, okay, there are these guys I met. Can you guys go find them? They were in technology. They do this and this. Go find these guys. And, lo and behold, a few days later, sir called me, said, oh, I am Bob. We met here. I want you to come and see me. I like the way you are honest and so on. And yeah, that started off my relationship with Bob. I ended up being his mentee. When I was leaving, he told me, "Oh, please go ahead. That bank seems to be doing quite a lot of good stuff, but keep in touch." When I was at Chase 6 months in, he asked me. We used to talk frequently, even when I left. So about 6 months after I had left, he asked me to come and speak to the leadership team together with our CEO about innovation and so on and so forth. Yeah. So when the bank went down, Bob reached out actually and said, "Peter, are you okay? Do you want to come back? We have opportunities here. If you want to consider, please do." And initially I said no. Then ultimately I said, "Fine, let me come back and we can agree what to do." So that's how I ended up being back in Safaricom. And since I came back, I have been focused on Ethiopia since 2016 when I came back to the organization. And we were lucky to have made it through to get our telecoms license in Ethiopia finally in 2021. The operation is started off. I've been supporting that. Then I took up my role now as the business strategy execution lead in the CEO's office, where I support the CEO and the leadership team and the board to actualize what we are planning for the group. So that includes Kenya, Ethiopia, and we have various other subsidiaries, M-Pesa Africa, and a few others. Yeah.
Well, you really moved quickly there from like 2016. You've just given us like a panoramic view. Could you please go back and tell us how you actually moved from an IT focused professional to a more management, boardroom, strategy? Was there some training you undertook there? Was it just the mentorship, or were there some programs that you undertook that converted you, sort of changed you from IT professional to boardroom mover?
Yeah, actually, thank you for asking that. There were many things that actually happened. So if I look back when my transition started, so my transition started about 2013, 2014. When I always used to think, and I know all IT and technology guys, engineering guys in the room would say, we are the ones who define where the company goes. But something happened in 2013 where I realized that we were just a cog in the business. We were just orchestrating what somebody else was deciding. And this happened when, we used to take ideas. I used to take ideas to our team, my boss, to some few people, including Bob. Actually, so what happened is, in 2012, I reached out to Bob and told him, I think there's an opportunity for fiber to home in 2012.
Yeah.
And I wrote him a proposal and showed him how I think it would work. And he told me, you know what, this looks like a good idea. Come and let's have a discussion in my office tomorrow morning. So I went with my boss, who wasn't happy that I had written to Bob about this proposal without discussing with him and his boss. Organizations, the hierarchy is kind of very important. So anyway, so we went with him, we had the conversation, and Bob told me, brilliant idea, but I don't think we are there yet. I don't think it's the right time. There are these gaps that we seem to have. So when we were leaving that meeting, I asked my boss, how is it that decisions are made in companies? Because this is an obvious opportunity. Nobody's doing it in Kenya. It's a big need that people have to be connected in their homes. Why would the CEO not consider it to be key? He could not answer me. And that's the day I realized that technology, IT, all of us, we are just, a cog in the entire thing.
Yeah.
Somebody else is deciding what the company will do, and we are just orchestrating what will be done. And at that point, I made a decision that I needed to change my career from technology, IT. I needed to move to a more business-like role. So I ended up looking for HR. I did quite a lot of career development activities. The first, which I would recommend to anyone if you haven't done it, was like a self-assessment. So
Yeah.
I did something with Conferry. If you have heard of Conferry, they do some career assessments, but they do both personality tests, but they also do career assessment, give you skills gaps and opportunities to develop. It's the first time I felt that somebody had really looked into me and given me an assessment of who I was, what my strengths were, where I needed to develop, and how I could align all of those things to the future I wanted. So when I did that, I realized areas I needed to develop. So I was very strong on the technical side. I was very strong on some few agilities like, mathematical analysis and so on. But I was fairly weak on external radar, what is happening around me. I was very weak on people agility, which is how you engage with people, how you manage teams, and so on. I was fairly weak on how I manage upwards. So for you to be effective, you need to be able to manage your team or give them proper guidance so that they're able to achieve the key objectives for your team. You need to manage across, which is with your peers, people at the same level, so that they can be able to support you and you can be able to support them. And you need to manage upwards, which is to your managers or your managers' managers and so on. And I realized I didn't have a good ability to manage upwards. So then I started working on myself. So, what I realized at the time in 2012 was that life in whatever you do is very simple. You have some inputs that you receive. There is some value addition that you do to it. There is some output that you give. Everybody that looks at you seeks to see what output you give. And the more valuable the output you give, the more value you will gain. The possibility of you being higher in the organization, getting paid more, or getting your business to get more business is when people see the value that you give. But you have to be very conscious to understand, so which inputs do you need to receive? How do you need to process those inputs to generate the output that will actually give you that elevation every time? So if you are able to define those input, what you need to do to enhance that input to generate the output, then you find you are scaling quite a lot. And when I discovered that in 2012, then I got into the model of developing myself and I created some habits. Doing a lot more, so doing more than I'm required to do, which is, I say, okay, my role requires X. What I want to do is to kind of almost perform at my boss's level, so that anybody looking at me is looking at me and saying, okay, I don't have to speak to your boss. I can speak to you and I can bring you to the places where I would only have your boss. And I have been lucky to have bosses who are kind of comfortable with that situation. There are quite a number who find it very uncomfortable. And for us, if you are a people manager, this is the most basic thing that I would say: allow your team to be at the same level or higher than you. In fact, if you can work for your team member, that is the best type of team member that you can have, because they will do a lot more things for you in the place where you are at than, if you bring people who are junior or very junior, or you can bring junior people, but you develop them to be people that you are willing to work for by creating that environment. And
so be willing for your juniors or for your team to share your limelight. Be willing to bring them to your meetings and have them speak representatively, like without trying to steal the limelight all the time.
Exactly. You need to develop them to a level where they can come to meetings where you would ordinarily be the one there, and allow them to speak, allow them to shine, allow them to be in the limelight, as you say, so that one of the critical skills for you to grow to a certain level in the organization is your ability to develop talent. And many of us who are in middle management end up missing that point. The moment you are able to show that you can actually develop people who are strong as yourself, or even stronger than you, then everybody has that view that you are able to identify talent and you are able to develop talent. And that kind of elevates you to a whole different level. Because, you know, there are some, you know, we look at them possibly in Safaricom in three main broad areas. There is business agility, which is your ability to deliver on what the business outcomes are or what your KPIs are. There is the people agility, which is what you are able to do with the team and everyone else. And then there is results agility, what you are personally accountable for and how you are able to deliver on what you are personally accountable for. And at senior leadership, these three are the main things that would be typically looked for. They might call it different things across organizations, even in your private practice. If you don't have these three things, you cannot succeed, you know. And therefore, when I learned that, I then developed myself quite heavily in the areas where I had gaps. I haven't fully developed in some of them, but I continuously, you know, kind of develop. So start with the assessment, kind of know yourself, know what drives you, know where you have gaps, seek where you can be able to develop yourself so that you can reduce the gaps, and then enforce your strengths. And then, you know, you seek out the opportunities. So opportunities are not handed to you. I remember my first manager, who is now the deputy governor of Eldoret, is called Engineer Barorot. I used to tell him, you know, I was very stubborn, as you can imagine, in my first year when I joined Safaricom. He was my first line manager. He was the chief technical officer at the time, and I was reporting to him. And after we did our rotation, he asked us to choose some roles. And I said, I want to go into software development. I don't care. I will not go to anything else. But he was like, the opportunities that are available are these two. And finally, we were a group of 10. 8 people chose the roles they wanted. 2 of us chose one role. And he said, I don't care. My role is to distribute you across the company. We cannot have 2 people working in the same team who have come through this program. And he gave us almost 2 weeks to agree between ourselves who is going to give up the role. And we both refused. Then, you know, after 2 weeks, he called us to his office and said, okay, so why don't you want to pick this role, Gichangi? Why? I said, oh, you know, this is my passion. And when I look at my career, this is the place I want to develop. And he gave me one blunt truth, which at the time I didn't believe, but now I see it fairly clearly.
Yeah.
He told me that, or told us, we were with a gentleman called Oscar, who was also in Moi, by the way. And he said, if you look at yourself and assume that your career path is a straight line, you will be very frustrated. You're ambitious, you are knowledgeable, you have the passion, but you must accept that your career, for you to grow to where you want to be, maybe a CEO of a company or whatever it is, you will have a zigzag, a kind of a winding path. It may not be a straight line from, you know, you start as a software developer, you go to a chief software developer, you go to a CTIO, you become a CEO. It may not be the case. You have to accept that it will be a winding road, and one day you will end up where you are, and kind of trust it, pick all the learnings, improve yourself every day. That's the most important. And over time, I have realized actually that is far more important than trying to be an expert in a thing. It is good. You have to have the depth in at least one critical business area or one area of your company. You have to be truly an expert. But you have to have broad knowledge across multiple aspects of the business for you to succeed as a senior leader, or for you to succeed as, you know, CEO of your private company, etc. And there is a time, you know, there was a term, and people can go and look at it, which was called purple people or T-shaped people. So purple people, you have some great skill in something, and then you have blended yourself with many other business skills. So you have some knowledge on HR, some knowledge on marketing, some knowledge on finance, and kind of you combine all those things, but you have an expertise, whether that is HR, accounting, IT, whatever, technology, whatever it is. And it's the same thing about T-shaped people. So T-shaped people is primarily saying you are a T. So you have some horizontal capabilities, but you have one definite vertical capability that in depth. So you know one thing in depth, and then you know multiple things on a high level that allows you to kind of be able to sense check, input, guide, etc. across the business.
Just interject there. You've clearly given us a very good scope there in terms of you are trying to find out what the inputs are, what you can add in terms of the value you can add, and then the output. And you've sort of made it appear like you're very intentional in the way you developed yourself. You're very intentional about it, and it was something you measured, something you worked on progressively. Now, how does that fit in with people who believe that for you to actually get into management, you just have to go to and enroll on an MBA, maybe in Nairobi University, do your MBA, and that will equip you now to get into management? Was that something you considered doing, or most of your skills that you learned in terms of adding value to the inputs was maybe just through you being more aware, being more networked, being more intentional in the way you interact with your colleagues at work? Did you have to do an MBA, or was it just you working on yourself?
That's a very good question to ask, because it's one of those that is heavily debated. Having an MBA helps in terms of understanding some broad aspects of management, but it has been abused quite heavily in our market, especially. I know for the global guys, maybe not as much. But when you look at it, for government institutions, if you're an employee of government, having an MBA then really helps you. So you find people who have an MBA, people who get a doctorate, then get kind of treated differently in government. They get positioned differently. They get invited to do various things, just on the basis of having those accreditations. In the private sector, however, it is not really as helpful. Having those papers doesn't define anything for you in the private sector in Kenya. What helps is for you to put your hand up and actually roll your sleeves and do some stuff for your entity, for your organization, etc. And the thing I found, and what I discovered is they assess whether you were just an attendee in an MBA class or you actually spent time to learn by seeing the way you transact or the way you do business, the way you pick up on various things. So the first thing, kujituma, the one where you are picking up stuff that is not even in your domain. I remember when I was an engineer in 2012, I volunteered to actually do some work on the Net Promoter Score. I don't know how many of us know, NPS, which measures how happy customers are with the services that you have. At the time, I had no clue what I was getting myself into. But I ended up learning so much and contributing so much to the team that every time we would go to present to the leadership team, I would be the one representing IT and networks on what we are doing for the Net Promoter Score. Ends up giving you a very different perspective, very different exposure. And that is what most of the companies are looking for. Not that you have a paper, but that you are willing to go the extra mile, you are willing to learn and develop yourself. In fact, I remember one of the managers, I can't remember who it was, and told me what they look for in somebody who has done a master's, MBA or otherwise, is your ability to learn and your ability to push yourself to do much more, to learn much more, to research. to go out of the way and ask questions that you would typically not ask. So they kind of look at that curiosity and try to see, are you pushing yourself out? Has the MBA embedded that culture for you to seek out additional things, different perspectives, etc.? And the moment they see that, then they're like, okay, so this is a person that might be able and willing to support or push the organization to a different view.
Right. So you've given us a sweep through your career from up to now in Ethiopia. How was it like moving outside the country? What is the culture in Ethiopia that is a bit different from what you've experienced in Kenya? How has it been generally? Have you moved there with your family? Just give us life there, man. Give us life in Addis.
Yeah. This I might give a through pass to Alex. Yeah, but when I started going there in 2016, I discovered there was a huge opportunity. So the country at the time was quite laid back, not as much technology development, fintech development as we had in Kenya. So the opportunity was massive. Only one telecommunications company. There wasn't any digital banking at all. It was just bare bone. You had to go. There weren't even ATMs at the time in 2016. Yeah. There were very few. There were, but very, very few. There were no POS where you could use your card to pay for anything. It was like very difficult. People used to carry loads of cash. Like in Kenya, I think people cannot imagine. In US, UK, people cannot imagine that you're carrying a bundle of 200,000. Not 200 is quite small, actually.
Yeah.
You're carrying almost 5 million. As like that, not in a bag, not in anything. You are just holding it by your hands and moving it from one place to another. You cannot imagine. You go to a gold shop, you want to buy a gold necklace, you are carrying that cash in bundles. I used to be shocked, and I used to ask, how is it possible? But therein, we saw the opportunities. We tried getting the telecoms license at the time, and the government told us a blunt no, very specifically to us, said, banking sector, telecom sector, we are not opening up. Look for anything else to do in the economy, we will not. We tried to get the government to intervene. UK at the time who came in, brought a delegation, but the Prime Minister told him the same thing as we were in that delegation. I remember we were with Dr. Mang'u of Equity. Same thing, say, telecoms, banking sector, we are not opening up. But we never gave up. We kind of said, okay, so what can we do, and so on. And then fast track 2019, there was quite a bit of change in the country. The government changed, the Prime Minister resigned. I remember I was in the country at the time when the Prime Minister resigned. And, they kind of shut off the airspace, shut off communication. So we had no way of reaching guys in Kenya. They had no way of reaching us. Our security was so concerned. But coincidentally, we were in a government office at the time, the Ministry of IT. And so the guys just told us, no, just stay here. So we ended up spending 3 or 4 hours with them, waiting for people to understand what was going on. Then finally, an interim Prime Minister was announced. Then they kind of opened things up. And, after that, the Prime Minister said he wants to open up everything. And things quickly moved on. So 2019, when he came in, we started following up on supporting them, actually. So in 2019, we brought a delegation to Nairobi on telecoms and fintech sector, banking sector. Then they started developing, liberalization regulations and so on, and we supported them through the process. We went through the bidding. I was lucky to be, the guy leading the Safaricom team in the consortium. So those who are aware, we created a consortium ourselves, Vodacom, Vodafone, Sumitomo of Japan, and the British investment vehicle, BII, British International Investment. And we then bid for the license at the time, and we successfully achieved the license. Then we formed a team, started with the company. I did not, at the time, my CEO wanted, that's Peter, wanted me to go and spend time in Ethiopia. I wasn't convinced that that's the move I wanted to make. So the compromise we ended up having with him is that I would spend 40% of my time in Kenya and 60% of my time in Ethiopia. And for that reason, I never took my family into Ethiopia. So I ended up spending quite a good chunk of my time in Ethiopia after we won the license. And then a good chunk also in Kenya doing various other things for the company. Then last year, he reached out to me severally asking me, oh, he wants me to support him in his office. Initially, I thought it was a bad move, and I said no. I couldn't see how it was linking up to my long-term goals. But after consideration for almost 3 months and talking to various people, I decided, let me pick it. And I must say, possibly this is, one of those roles that I am doing now that you end up, you are almost shadowing the CEO every day in everything they're doing. Sometimes you end up doing quite a lot of stuff on behalf of the CEO. So it's almost like a chief operations officer role or chief of staff role, in other places. Quite an interesting role. You end up learning quite a lot. And that's kind of where I am now. All that began, because of what we were doing in Ethiopia, how he thought I was running Ethiopia, managing our partners, managing the various stakeholders, government of Kenya, government of Ethiopia, people in the leadership team, the board, and so on. And he felt then that I could add value for him in the CEO's office.
Awesome. Before I ask you about what it takes really to really make it in the Kenyan corporate sector, especially the higher echelons of it, you have also served as chairman of Safaricom Investment Cooperative for a number of years. I think you're out of that space now. But what was the experience of you working full time in corporate and also managing one of the largest cooperatives in Kenya? I engaged with you a lot when you're in that space, and I could see the amount of workload that you are shifting. How was it? I mean, how are you able to do this?
You are so right, by the way, and I must thank you for hosting me in the UK when I came in 2019 to visit the UK, and we decided to do some roadshow for the cooperative at the time. And I must thank Greg and Kisipan, I think he's not here. When I went to the US, I think, but this was far back in 2016, Kigan and Kisipan hosted me as well. We had some good times with them in the US. But back to your point, it has been, it is quite a sacrifice. So first is I started investing in various things quite early, I think, in my life. So almost immediately after campus, I started investing in various things. So by 2009, I had invested in a few assets, intangible, immovable assets across various places. And then I invested also in the SACCO, making some savings there. And then when we started the investment cooperative, I also, kind of invested fairly well in the investment cooperative. So by the time it was 10 years later in 2019, my portfolio was fairly large in the investment cooperative. And I felt that I wanted to be more involved in how the cooperative was running, the type of decisions that were being made, the type of investments, and so on. And I chose to vie for to be a board member. And then when I got onto the board, I actually chose to be the chairman, and I really pushed the various board members on the same. I ended up being the chairman for 5 years. I stepped down last year because of this new role, which is much more demanding than my previous roles. But what I had to do was really balance my corporate role and my chairmanship in this cooperative. So I would do my normal work during the day, and from 6 p.m. on a typical day, between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m., I would typically be doing the cooperative work. And then on the weekends as well, Saturdays, most of the Saturdays, especially Saturday morning from 7 a.m. to about 2 p.m., I would always be doing the cooperative's work. So my nights, cooperative, my weekend, cooperative. So I had barely any time on weekends to do anything else. During the nights, it was very difficult for me to, get engaged on any other business other than the cooperative related activity. So it was quite a sacrifice for the 5 years, but it was quite fulfilling as well, seeing the type of impact we were able to make in that period.
Awesome. And I'm sure that opened up a lot of spaces for you. You were able to meet a lot of people, interact with many people in the cooperative sector, and it also impacted well on your career. I think they were feeding on each other, isn't it? You being chairman of the cooperative and you working the corporate ladder as well.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things I realized is the amount of exposure you have. So you are right in terms of exposure to meet people and build networks, so which is very helpful for you. And I know even today, people come and tell me, oh, I met, so-and-so who told me there is a Peter Gichangi who is doing some stuff for us in this, cooperative. And they're like, Peter seems to know everybody in this place, So in that sense, it kind of helps. But much more important is the way it helps you to this, different type of exposure. It may be a cooperative, it may be volunteering for being on a board of a school or being on a board of an NGO or whatever it is, and sometimes not even volunteering, just being on them, really helps you to kind of shift your way of thinking by the type of conversations that happen in those levels, especially where you pick something that is totally different from your own. You get yourself to expand so much, because I had to learn everything about, one, being a board member, two, being a board chairman, three, the real estate business in detail, and four, all the other associated activities of running a business. This was kind of the first time for me where I would sit totally out and look at all metrics of the business, every single metric. How are the employees doing? How much are you paying them? Are they happy doing the work they are doing? Do we need to shift anything? What type of trainings are they being planned for? Which investments are you making? How much is the budget for the year? How are you utilizing that budget? Where have you gone over? Where have you gone under? It was meticulous. So which office do you have? Is that the right location? Which people do you know? Do your employees know the right people? What type of suppliers do you have? Are they building the organization? Are there some who are creating disrepute? I ended up going through so many things that really build a very different perspective for me on various matters. Of course, that fed into quite a lot. So by the time, and you are right, by the time I was getting to be asked to be the lead for Ethiopia, I remember I used to meet some of our leadership team members for various discussions. And Peter, our CEO, would often make the joke and say, I know most of you cannot tell, is Peter a lawyer? Is he an IT person? Is he, a technology person? Is he a finance person? Because you end up having to grasp everything. But I could not have gotten to that level if I had not been on the board of SIC. Because on the board of SIC then, and as the chairman, you kind of have to understand almost everything and you invest the time to learn it, you see. By the time I got to Ethiopia, it was kind of natural for me to understand everything and be able to speak coherently on every aspect of the business. You start technology, we go to marketing and whatever it is, we go to legal. I would be able to kind of converse on all the matters. And I must say, being on the Safaricom Investment Cooperative really helped me to do that. If you have an opportunity, don't shy away. Step in, expose yourself to those type of opportunities. They will take quite a bit of your time for you, but they will also build you intensely. I know you can speak about the same for yourself with your UK diaspora circle, yeah?
I know it is. It's quite a consuming space. It takes a lot out of you in terms of your private time and your work time as well. But it's rewarding, and the networks you build are invaluable, are worth a lifetime. So as guys are raising up their hands, you can raise your hand to ask a question. Maybe the big one for everyone who's attended is, if someone is in a position whereby they are maybe on the cusp of wanting to join corporate, as you say, maybe they've been working in specialized roles, IT, finance, and now they want to make that next step so that they can sort of go into corporate leadership, where now they're maybe a director or they're a manager up there. What are the things that you would recommend someone needs to do to develop themselves to a point where they are able to take that next step to be in the boardroom, to make decisions, rather than just taking the decisions that have been made for them to execute? What are the things you'd recommend? What's the change in outlook, in perspective, in practice that can help someone take that next step up?
Thank you. And I think maybe you are then coming to my question, Steve, because I would want to push this possibly back to the people to think about. And it all starts with what do you want? What do you want to achieve in your lifetime? And, initially I had a very strong desire for politics, and it hasn't died. It's still very much alive. I still find myself in those emotions on very many situations. But then what is it you want at the end of your life? If today somebody was to read your life story or your biography, what is it that you would want them to have in there? And the moment you are able to answer that question, then it becomes very easy to say, what things do you want to do in life? And therefore, what do you require to change today to achieve that goal? That's the kind of the primal question that everybody needs to assess or ask themselves. But once that is done, then there are some very basic things that you will find. And there are basic principles, regardless of whatever you want to do, whether you're in business or employment. The first is you need to have a passion for what you're doing. That's the first. Once you have the passion, that passion will allow you to go above and beyond, which is the second thing. You get rewarded both in business and in employment for going above and beyond, for delivering more value everywhere. Whether it is your business needs to be perceived to deliver more value than it is expected to. Then everybody will be like, oh, actually, I'm getting very good benefit from this business. I want to give them more, and I can recommend them to my friend. If you are an employee, then your manager or your manager's manager will be the one talking about, say, oh, Steve, oh, Jethro is such a good guy. They do X and Y. If you want anything done in this area, this is the person who you need to talk to. The moment you have your ambassadors or other people speaking about you in rooms where you are not, and saying, if you need anything, this is what you need to do, then you know you are in a very good space. The third is you need to live up to the expectations you set, which has both about accepting to do things and rejecting to do things. People assume, for you to go up in the ladder, you have to accept, when people make requests to you, you have to accept. Not necessarily true. Quite a number of times, you need to say no to some requests. because, you know, if saying yes will create disappointment, it is far worse to create disappointment than to actually tell somebody outright, I will not be able to do this for you now. I wish I could, but I'm not able to. And then you kind of deliver, but go beyond whatever you commit. There's something I had wanted to show, and I don't know if I'll be able to.
Carry on, please.
There it is.
That's what it is.
Exactly. So the most important thing is there are certain aspects about what you do that helps people decide how to interact with you. There are things that you love doing, which, you know, some people call hobbies, but kind of where you are most at peace when you are doing something. There are things that you are good at, and possibly these are things you have developed yourself in things that you are trained at, and so on and so forth, and you have become very good at. And then there are possibly things that people would like you to do for them, things that people want from you, or things that people are asking you to do, which is the other thing. Now, the best is the intersection of all three, which creates your craft. Most people are not willing to pay you for things that you just love doing, unless you can be able to monetize them. So for you to grow in your career, you need to find this balance and discover your craft. Find this, you are either in the point where all the three interact, or you are on the top left, where you have something that you love to do and something that you're good at. If you have that intersection, then most probably you are going to find a place where, or people who are interested in those type of things, and you really try to excel in them. If you find yourself in just doing what you're good at and that is it, you may get frustrated in your career or in your business or so on, and you may not be as fulfilled if that is the only thing that you're doing. So the most important is to kind of find this balance. And the moment you find this balance, then you'll be able to easily grow in your career. So you develop yourself, find the areas where you're strong or weak, work best to move yourself further up in terms of how you're perceived by the market or by the people that you work with, if you are in an organization, in terms of the value you bring. Your value is very important. Then second is your brand. You need to be known as a person who helps the business. So, I used to be very naive and, bluntly so, with my raw energy, as Enjoyer once told me, where you are thinking, everything is the way you see it yourself. And then, I remember Pastor Enjoyer, kind of trained us as student leaders at some point, and he was telling us, it's not only about what you see. What you see is your perception of the world. But what everybody else understands is what they perceive of the environment. A good leader, or for you to then be in that level where you can really perform, you need to have this emotional intelligence or some certain quotient of knowledge that allows you to understand what is good, what it is that you understand, and what it is that other people understand that you might not. Then the intersection helps you to see, so what is the best thing to do? So there is what you understand, what other people understand and you don't, and what is best to do. And you kind of work in that space so that you find the best. For you to be successful in the organization, then people need to perceive you to be in that space where you are able to balance all the aspects. And that might be, whatever it is, whether it is the business side, the technology side, whether you're running your own business, when you're meeting clients, then they want to see you understand them, but you also understand exactly what you are required to do for them.
Brilliant. That's a really good way of explaining what mindset you need to develop for you to grow as a into corporate leadership. No questions on the chat, just people saying it's just been so inspiring listening to you. Yeah, people having breadth and depth that has caught their attention. Adis having beautiful ladies. Karibu sana. So anybody, you can unmute yourself and fire.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter, for sharing. This has truly been an executive coaching moment. It feels like almost. Well, I just wanted to get your perspective on, what personal financial stability means, especially as you pursue some of these opportunities, and what it's meant for you. And along those lines too, just wanted to get your perspective on the kind of opportunities that you see that might be available for all of us in both within Safaricom in terms of investments or even in Ethiopia, and some of the things that we can think about.
Thank you, Greg. I don't know whether we take the second one from Alex or we answer this one first.
Yeah, let's have them both, then you can answer them. It could be overlapping.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So, Peter, I think for the benefit of everyone in the group, because all of us are growing in our careers, I think it would be good if you can tell us how you've also been navigating, the corporate politics, and some of the pain areas and how you've managed that effectively.
Thank you. I think, Alex, you ask a loaded one. So let me start with the easier ones. Not necessarily very easy, but I think good questions from Greg. I think in terms of personal development, when looking at it, there are multiple aspects of personal development, and there is various things that you could look at to determine what that means for each one. The best I found was this wheel that kind of defined various aspects of life, spiritual, family, financial, work, health and wellness, and so on. And it kind of helps you assess how you are doing across all of these spheres of life, and then helps you to reevaluate or think about what are the areas where you're over-indexing and which ones you are not. And then you kind of define what is the balance that you want. But once you have known that, then the question becomes, where do you want to spend much more of your time doing more? In 2010 or 11, I had an incident in the office where I was taken to hospital, and they told me that I had high blood pressure. I was barely 30, and I was like, how is it possible that I have high blood pressure? And I really started relooking at my life, everything. What is it that I am focusing on? What is it that would be causing this type of things? Is it my lifestyle? Is it work? Is it personal life? And then I reevaluated and realized maybe I'm focusing on, one, I'm putting too much pressure on myself. Maybe my family, my mom and my dad are putting too much pressure as well. But maybe I was also not taking good care of myself. So the first thing I realized, and one of the things I've realized for most of the leaders, senior leaders, CEO level, the first thing that you have to do in personal development is take care of yourself. In fact, one of the CEOs told me, there is no way I can take care of my business and my people if I don't take care of myself. And that was a profound statement. I had never thought about it before. And that's kind of the first thing that I would say to each one of us. First, you have to start by taking care of yourself. Once you take care of yourself, then you have the energy, the opportunity, the strength to take care of everything else. The second bit, of course, is we all do all the things we do to be able to create a certain type of lifestyle. And you have to identify what that lifestyle is. If you are an avid reader, or whether you listen to podcasts and things like that, you might have come across some of the speakers that have talked a lot about finding the proper balance for what you then invest in. One of the guys that I love listening to is Jim Rohn. And there are some things that you need to do on personal development which are around your behaviors, or which things then define the type of stuff that you spend most of your time on. What type of friends do you have, and what do they influence you to do? These were some of the questions that we were discussing with Steve that we could kind of share, and maybe we'll post them in the group. What are the things that you are then investing your money in? The most important is not to invest in expenditure, but to put your money into things that generate more money for you, even when you don't need to be there. So I have been lucky. I think I had told you at the beginning, I started investing almost immediately after campus. And I started investing in things that generated more value for me, where I would get a 40% return and invest back that return. So I may have started small, maybe like 200,000 shillings at the time. And then, in the first year, you get a 60% return. You invest the entire 60 back into the thing. The next year, you get a 40 or 50. The compounding nature of those investments on my own account, I can tell you, has had profound impact. So delayed gratification, you kind of allow yourself, you don't need to spend on frivolous things. You don't need to spend on, I know people used to tell me, oh, you're no longer going out with us. You don't like hanging out with the boys. For me, it's not as important. Once in a while, I will do it once in a quarter or something like that, sometimes once in half a year or a year. But I would not spend a lot of my time hanging out, spending my money on trips or, such other things. I would invest quite a bit and then invest in things that generate some good return that I can also invest back in, and then kind of compound that into multiple things. So that is the other thing that possibly can help in terms of personal development. In terms of opportunities, there are very many. Looking at them and depending in which field you are. If you're in the technology field, IT, or whatever it is around technology, there is so much happening in the East African region in general. There's digitization happening in every area. All governments are looking to digitize a lot of their stuff, make them more efficient, make it more efficient for citizens to do stuff, collect money from citizens and so on. But with that comes all the other things like the field that Steve is in, cybersecurity, big opportunity all across. What does government do with this data? What do businesses do with this data? Most of them are not clear. So whether that is analysis, AI, etc. There are, of course, softwares that require to be developed and big opportunities there. But there's also a lot on infrastructure. We still have very few people with proper housing. I know government might be doing what they're doing and saying they are doing various things, but even what they're doing first, I think, would be, of course, whatever government typically does with its challenges. But genuinely, there are people who are looking for the authentic opportunities for them to invest in homes and so on. Infrastructure, whether it be roads, water, clean water, etc. Very, very many opportunities like that in Ethiopia and Kenya. The caution I would give for Ethiopia, and maybe Alex is better suited to speak to this because he works with banks more. You have a challenge of repatriation from Ethiopia if you are in Kenya or abroad. And for yourself, Greg, depending on whether you want to come home or you want to remain in US, even Kenya is starting to face those challenges with devaluation of the shilling in terms of you being able to convert your earned value in Kenya shillings back into dollar. And therefore, the best balance, if you are able to hit it, is to be able to do business in these countries in Africa, at the same time be able to do some export type of business. When you are able to do that, then you can kind of find some sort of balance in it. If I was to come to the last question that came from Alex, corporate politics. When I left Safaricom, I think one of the biggest things that was my frustration was the corporate politics. And I was very naive to assume that it is only in Safaricom where it is that heavy. Then I went to Chase Bank and I discovered it is not different. And what I have learned over the years is that you have to be, one, ruthless enough to be able to cut through quite a bit of that politics, but you also have to be intelligent enough to know which politics you need to play and which one you need to avoid. And play in this sense means kind of balancing. So there is some quotient you need to develop around corporate politics to be able to identify what is it that can break you, what is it that you can be able to defray and manage, and what is it that you can swing with without it impacting you at all. It is a complex balance. It is easier for people when you have been in an organization longer. The more you move around, the more you learn, but also the more difficult it is. And you often find, it, depending on the type of corporate you're going to, in some of them, people say, oh, that's another new guy who is coming in and leaving, because they know the corporate politics will kick you out 3-6 months in. Politics can actually destroy your career completely. So understand who the key players are, who are the political movers in each organization or where you work, understand what influence they have and on which matters. On those matters, you engage them quite effectively. It is best if you are able to get these people who have a lot of political clout to be your ambassadors, so that sometimes when you're not there, then they can speak for or on your behalf. But you should not let them dictate the type of things that you're going to do, where you are very clear that it cannot work if they are pushing for certain positions. Seek them individually out of group sessions and have that exchange with them to say, look, this cannot work for XYZ. I think the biggest thing where I have seen the challenges in corporate politics is where people decide to go head on with some of the guys who influence the most in the corporate politics, and they are going head to head in places where it is a public forum, and they end up having huge scars that emerge from that they may never be able to recover from. If you find yourself in that situation, you just say, okay, I would like us to have a separate conversation outside of this session and allow us to come back when we are ready, but I'll come and see you and discuss. Then you kind of move it out to those people. Best is to deal with it before you have sessions where you know there'll be heated arguments. And so you kind of align most of your critical stakeholders, you want to call them so, outside of the session before you have the topic that might elicit a lot of reaction.
Fabulous. That's really insightful from you, Peter. Who else has got a question? Has got something to ask or to add? Because we've had some very good nuggets, very insightful thoughts coming through this evening. So Peter, it looks like you say that for you to grow as a corporate leader, you've had sort of to hold your political ambitions, which are still bubbling under, but you've had sort of to keep a check on them. But you're not quite ruled out the opportunity for you to get back to go full scale into politics in the future. Are you thinking you'd like to really milk this corporate space first and see what it has to offer you before maybe eventually you might move into politics? Is that something you've thought about?
It's always a tricky question. First is, for all the managers that I have worked with, the first disclosure I give them is that I am very political. That's the first disclosure I usually give them, so that they are all aware. Fortunately, I have had managers who are like, okay, fine, but how are you going to manage it when you are in this role? And we kind of reach a balance on what to do or what not to do. And when they see me getting very political, they usually come and tell me, Peter, you have started doing that thing that we discussed. So you need to tone down, step aside. Umeanza hii maneno maandamano, wacha hizi vitu, you cannot show your hand and so on. So yeah, that has been helpful. I think the first thing I learned is just to be honest with especially my line manager, that this is my nature, this is who I am. So if you see me behaving in a certain way, just know it is because of what I am as myself. And if I need to change, please don't hesitate to tell me that you kind of need to change. I have had quite a number of guys up country coming to tell me, yeah, siukue MP, siukue governor, siujaribu hii kitu. I still have not gotten to a point.
What's your area MP? What's your area? I mean, area constituency. What's your constituency?
Kirinyaga Central. With of course, unless
this guy will be my MP, Bana. We've been proposing for that.
Murage and Rokoth changed, we are in the same place.
Awesome.
Kirinyaga Central.
I hope that's what they're.
Yeah, I've been thinking. I mean, I've said I don't want to get involved at this point in time, but what I have been doing, which I would encourage all of us to do, is I take the opportunity that I have to do quite a number of things in my village, in my locality, actually in my, a larger county when I get that. So things like CSR, Safaricom does quite a number of CSR. So every year I get an opportunity to decide whether I want to support a school, support a hospital, stuff like that. When we were doing quite a bit of stuff on drought, I had the opportunity to influence what we are doing, in different places, actually across the country for, some of those, but also in my home area. I participate in quite a number of those things that many of us don't like. Black tax related stuff, Harambe, this, church function, that, and so on and so forth. Then I've said in time, if I ever decide, then possibly I will participate. But we have been able to do quite a number of things over the years, which I'm quite proud of. Refurbished one of the primary schools, build a modern market in the place. As we are doing a health center in some place. I've done multiple, programs in various schools across the county there, from doing some classes to fields to, building hostels, dormitories, stuff like that across different places. So I kind of find more joy in that at the time for now. But maybe in future, I will reconsider and say, let me put all my feet into this thing.
Sure, I've seen comments there coming through. Alex Mrage says, Peter mobilized Safaricom to set up a new library in my primary school. And Tured has gone all the way by saying Peter for president. You look, in a country where we clearly have a deficit of good leaders. Nowadays, it has become like, it's a money thing. You've got money, you pour the money and you buy the seat and then you eat. It would be a breath of fresh air to have people like you standing for office and actually getting into parliament and introducing new blood and new conversations that are pro-people. So it's good. It's good that you're doing that. And you've encouraged us as well to take the opportunity to do that to our constituencies or our counties and try to give back to the community if we're in a position where we can control how the resources or programs are being distributed. I think we are almost wrapping it up. I will give Peter maybe just the opportunity to give us his last thoughts before we wrap it up.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you everyone for making the time. For this one, I think I started off by saying maybe, or at some point in our conversation said, think about what life goals you want to achieve, and that kind of becomes your true north that defines everything else, every other decision that you make. I think in terms of how you do it, which is a big point to part of the conversation we have had just now about leadership and what we have or don't have in the country. I found this from one of my bosses who told me, if you want to know whether you are doing the right thing, you ask yourself just 2 questions. And I would leave this with you tonight. Would you be happy explaining to your mom what you spent your day doing, or what it is that you're doing every day? If you would be excited to tell your mom about it, you are kind of on the right path. The second one that that manager told me was, what would your kids tell other people that you are doing? Kids are kind of free spirit, and we all remember when our kids say, oh, my dad will beat your dad, that type of stuff. When your kid is in that heat of the moment and they are saying, oh, your dad does, oh no, my dad is even better, they do X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. How comfortable would you be with your kid knowing exactly what you're doing and being able to go and tell other people that this is what my dad does? And that free spirit. If you ever find yourself for these 2 questions having doubt that you would want your mom to know or your kids to speak about it, then it is time to reflect on whether that is kind of the right thing that you are doing, and if you need to change. And if we reflect on these 2 questions every day, I think our country will be in a better position than it is today.